All right, folks. Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Don't forget to like the videos if you like them and share them far and wide. I hope you all had a great weekend. Going into the weekend, obviously, was some very big news that former FBI director, Jim Comey was indicted. And before we get into some of the details and the specifics, let me just say that as of right now, there's a lot of speculation, but the truth is not a whole lot of people understand what the government has on Jim Comey. And there's two parts to this. There's one part that basically argues about the unprecedented nature of this indictment, or at least how Donald Trump went about going to get it. And the other part has not been discussed much at all. And that is what we're going to talk about today. We'll leave a little bit of time for some of the other stuff later on, but you can tell from the news coverage that first part I'm talking about the unprecedented nature of it, yada, 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 which I don't think is unprecedented at all. Actually, we'll push back on that. And that's the problem. That has been the problem for a while. But I don't want to jump the gun here. The media coverage, if you're watching it and how people reacted to this indictment, you'll see the point that I'm trying to make, which is that we're all discussing this. You know, the media is outraged over it. All of Comey's supporters, all of the people in the media who worked with Jim Comey and an element within the United States government, appointed and not appointed, to undermine an elected president and frame him for a crime and frame others around him for crimes that they did not commit, in an effort to get something to use as a pretext to remove him from office. Ladies and gentlemen, again, we will wait to see what the government is saying and what they have on him. But that is called sedition. Jim Comey engaged in a conspiracy to essentially overtake or topple the duly elected president of the United States. That is sedition by definition. I mean, he is a traitor. That is what he is. Yet, because he worked with corporate media, many of them put him on a pedestal and put him on prime time, got him a book deal, you name it. So the way they're responding to this is, of course, predictable in some ways, but it doesn't mean we can't stop or shouldn't stop to recognize the charade in all of this. And there is a charade. And if you're a Trump supporter, I'm going to rain on your parade a little bit here. I mean, that's what we do here. You know, we speak the truth when it doesn't matter, and when it doesn't, it isn't popular. All right, with most of the people that I know will be watching today, because I told them that we were going to do this. The fact of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, indictments don't matter. You can get an indictment even in the Northern District in Virginia, even in the District of Columbia. It doesn't matter. And getting an indictment is actually straightforward. It's fairly easy. It's easier, obviously, if you are in certain jurisdictions and those jurisdictions favor the prosecution. If it is a high-profile political case, it is more difficult to get an indictment in jurisdictions like the District of Columbia. But as we know from John Durham's investigation, it is not impossible. A conviction, on the other hand, despite smoking gun evidence, which John Durham had, is an entirely different story. And I worry, and we've talked about this in my Locals book club in great detail. I worry about an attempt to get accountability that the country wants, that the country expects, all right, and then not being able to deliver. Because the promise of something is one thing. The promise and then an attempt to deliver and a failure to deliver is going to, in this case, given what most of the country thinks Jim Comey did, because they're right, in this case, could be deeply harmful to the integrity of our entire system, which is hanging by a thread as it currently stands. I'm going to show you some data. Bear with me. We will get there. But first, I want to go through some of the media clips that I think are noteworthy that are making my point, which is that everyone's just kind of carrying on and acting the way that they would normally act without recognizing that without judicial reform in this country, the ability for better people, more moral people, whatever you want to call it, the innocent who are wronged, right, who then get into power, their ability to hold bad actors, corrupt actors accountable is going to be extremely hindered. It will be very difficult to get a conviction in the case, whatever it is, despite the evidence. And I'm telling you, despite the evidence. And then now with that, let's start with some of these clips so you can understand that some of these people just don't get that.
Be kneecapping his own prosecutors here.
Well, look, that's the thing. There's a system, and the system includes grand juries and juries of ordinary Americans who get in a room and make decisions. He can't order people to be indicted. He can't order people to be convicted. He can express his opinion. In the case of Comey, grand jurors in a very liberal jurisdiction got together and decided that the evidence did warrant charges. Comey will go to trial, and then a jury of his peers will decide whether he is guilty or not. The president can't do anything about that. He can make commentary on it. I'm not sure if it's wise or not wise to do that, or if it will matter at all. But ultimately, I'll just say what Jim Comey said when Donald Trump was indicted. It's a good day for the rule of law because we have a system, and the system is in place, and the system is working as it was designed, with average, ordinary Americans making decisions about how our laws will be enforced.
Okay, let me just stop right there, and let me just say that is the reverse of what is happening now, both optically and how it will impact the potential jury pool, which we're going to talk about what a potential juror pool is. It is not wise for Donald Trump to go out there and tout that he indicted Jim Comey. Now, I know his supporters want that. I know that. I get that. I thought it was hilarious. I think Jim Comey should spend the rest of his life in the bottom of a wet dirt hole. He's a piece of shit, and he doesn't deserve to enjoy the freedoms that he was entrusted to protect and defend, and then abused the way he does. He's the worst kind of so-called public servant. He's the worst kind. He's the most damaging kind of bureaucrat, the most damaging kind of government figure. But the fact of the matter remains, Jim Comey's remarks after Donald Trump were indicted, it's a good day for the rule of law, were not helpful to his cause because of how politics impacts how our proceedings, how our system is carried out. First of all, Trump will need public opinion to remain on his side. Jim Comey and how the rest of them behaved when Donald Trump was arrested exacerbated, or I would even say accelerated, how fast the tide of public opinion swept them away right off their moral pedestals, which they erroneously stood on for so long. And if you guys don't know this, Jim Comey is, I don't know if anyone's ever explained this to you before, who Jim Comey is, what he is. This is one narcissistic son of a bitch. This guy has, like, have you ever heard the expression delusions of grandeur? Have you ever heard that? I have probably spoken with a half a dozen or more people who have worked with Jim Comey in justice and at the Bureau who have described Jim Comey to me. It is more than a half a dozen. It's got to be a dozen who have described Jim Comey as somebody who has delusions of grandeur. Like, he believes he is a very important figure in history. He believes that without him and people like him that are in his circles, the Republic would not survive. He believes he's better than everybody else. He believes he's more moral than everybody else. He is a world-class piece of shit. All right, just personally and morally and everything else. That is the kind of character that Jim Comey is. So he could not contain himself, and he hurt his own cause. Trump would be wise not to do that because in this situation, it's the reverse. You will already be dealing with an unfavorable jurisdiction, despite what Scott just said here. And I get Scott's point, but the fact of the matter is a grand jury indictment is not the same as a conviction by a juror of their peers. It is much, much easier, even in a liberal jurisdiction, to get an indictment from a grand jury. All right. So we're talking about two totally different things. I understand the point he's trying to make, but let's come back down to planet Earth here for a second. All right. Anything Donald Trump says about this case will hurt the prosecution. It will. because this is the most adversarial jurisdiction, region of the country for Trump, his supporters, his followers, and by the way, just the right in general. Because as we all have heard in the past, Jim Comey's a Republican, right? Robert Mueller's a Republican. They are not Republicans in the sense, if they ever were, they are not Republicans in the sense that you know yourself, if you're watching out in regular America, to be a Republican. First of all, they were only Republicans in the Bush era kind of Republicanism, the fake Reaganism. These people like Comey and his mentor, Bob Mueller, rode the Reagan coattails and pretended to be conservatives, pretended to be Republicans, and they never were. They were all about government power. Jim Comey was waiting, Bob Mueller were waiting for an incident like 9/11 so that they could get tools that they never otherwise would have been able to get. Dangerous tools to be used to come after you. And that's exactly what they have done with them. To be able to seize more power for the institution which they believe in and they serve. Sovereign voter? What's that? You're all stupid Walmart shoppers to them. And you smell. You can't be trusted with the incredible, important role of picking your own sovereign. They'll do that for you. Go buy your underwear at Walmart. They got this. All right. So let me just point that out. I don't want to go through this clip without pointing that out. The rest of this clip without. We're talking about something totally different here. This is the reverse. Jim Comey should have shut his big mouth. Andrew Weissman should have shut his big mouth. Everyone at MSNBC should have dealt with it professionally. And of course, the tide turned to the point where public opinion was so against what they were doing to Donald Trump. He was kicking everyone's ass in the polls and got elected as a felon. Trump and his supporters would really be wise not to make the same mistake. If you want to be perceived as professional, if you want to be perceived as worthy of the power that was entrusted to you, to dish out accountability, because make no mistake, Donald Trump was elected to hurt these people. He was elected to get the economy straight again, to put out the brush fires overseas that Joe Biden allowed to ignite, and to put these sons of bitches behind bars. He was. That's why he won the voter who said that threats to democracy was their number one issue. After everything we went through with January 6th, which is important. And remember, because I'm going to show you some polling data in a second to try to get you to understand the difference, all right, and how the Overton window has shifted here. And if they want to hope to get a conviction, they're going to have to do that. In fact, this may be the best way to be, at the end of the day, to advance judicial reforms, because these reforms are way past the due date. The problem is, in a nutshell, before I finish this, Jim Comey his guilt or innocence will be decided by the same corrupt system that he served for so long. Good luck.
But you know, you said that he can't actually order the indictment of someone. I think he just proved that he could. I think what he did, the series of events that took place here, we have to actually be clear about what happened, right? He tried to pressure Eric Siebert at the Eastern District of Virginia.
You know what? I think that we will wait, and that's true. And it doesn't matter. Eastern District, Northern District, Southern District, District of Columbia, doesn't matter. These are all the worst jurisdictions you should possibly get to. And of course, Trump knew that. That's why he was trying to get to the Eastern District. All right, we'll get to that. I'll come back to this. I'm gonna pop this down for a second. We will come back to that question, and that's the question of whether or not Donald Trump did something here that is unprecedented and novel. I'm going to argue that's total bullshit. Democrats have been ordering their political opponents to be put behind bars for years, decades and decades and decades. In fact, it's the year 2025. Folks, we're coming up on a freaking century worth of this. That's horseshit. But I digress. I do want to bring up last thing here of because we can pivot to this, I just want to show you the polling data in between these segments, right? The segues, because I want you to understand what Donald Trump is up against. Okay. And honestly, the country is up against. If ever there was a time to teach the deep state a lesson and say, look, we are the sovereign voter. We will determine who leads us. You don't get that choice. The executive branch is run by a man or a woman who represents us, who's picked by us. You're all just servants. And when they abuse that, you have to have a way to punish them. And if there was ever a case to do it, it would be this one. But it's going to be tough. Despite what this guy says. Here we go with this clown show. I understand what he's saying, and he makes a good point. But let me just shut up, and then when we come back, I'll explain. Like, honestly, it doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter. And I will tell you from my private experiences that it does not matter. I'll even give you an example of a case that I was on, a high-profile case that I was on. We did win, but how close we came to losing. And where it was will, like, shock you. This place voted for Trump 3 times. Not by much, but it voted for Trump 3 times. And yet, one almost sent an innocent person to jail for potentially the rest of his life.
Any of us actually really know whether or not Comey is or is not guilty of the charges? I know that they parade out all of these pundits. They have the great titles in the Chiron.
He's kind of right about this.
Prosecutor, yada, yada, former FBI.
They haven't seen shit.
Who's seen a single document
He's right about
that's
this,
in the
actually.
possession right now of the DOJ? The answer is nobody. Who has the crystal ball? Still nobody. I will tell you from my investigation, which I used Brian Karem, who's a 30-year White House correspondent, to speak to people inside government because they wouldn't talk to me. I've learned that Comey was actually very much involved in the Russia investigation in a very negative way. And chances are this DOJ has every single email, every text message, every communication.
Don't say, Mike.
I believe likely he will be found guilty.
Oh, well, that's interesting because
I think he likely committed a crime.
Wait, what? What specifically?
I believe likely he committed a crime. I don't know what that crime is, but there are hundreds of thousands of documents, and government has each and every one of them. All they need to find is that one.
There it is. All they got to find is that one. And he would know because of what they did to him. And don't forget, Michael Cohen eventually flipped on Donald Trump, although he gave them nothing because Michael Cohen is a liar. But what happened with Michael Cohen, of course, is that the special counsel went through all of everybody in Trump's orbit, all of their financials, their entire lives. They turned everything upside down and ruined everybody's life because using a pretext of a fake crime that didn't happen. It's outrageous what they did to these people. Absolutely outrageous. And when they went through Michael Cohen's, they found that the Medallion taxi cab company that he owned in New York City under his wife's name was used in loan applications, basically, and were overvalued. And the Mueller team, which, of course, when we say the Mueller team, look at Robert Mueller. He had freaking Parkinson's. We all saw him bouncing around like Michael J. Fox during his testimony. The guy was stupid. He didn't run shit. The dirtiest prosecutor ever in the history of the United States, Andrew Weissman, ran that. And they threatened him and said, your wife's going to jail, Michael. Your wife's going to jail. And he was mad that Donald Trump didn't give him, I kid you not, don't laugh because it's serious. He thought he was going to be chief of staff at the White House when Donald Trump was elected the first time. Don't laugh. He thought it. We talked to his neighbor. I did. They thought this. And man, he was pissed at Trump. He was in a place where he hated him. And then he felt like he wasn't being protected, that Trump could not protect him from these people. So he flipped. And he did what he had to do, or what he thought he had to do to survive. I call that a piece of shit rat, but, maybe I'm old school. Turns out he had nothing to rat. But the point of the matter is that he knows better than most people what they're talking about. They just need to find that one thing. They found on Michael Cohen a minor overvaluation of his medallion taxi cab company in order to secure loans, and told the man that they would throw his wife in jail if he did not cooperate. That's who these people are. And by cooperate, of course, they mean make shit up. Say whatever we need you to say, which he did. And more, which ultimately created their case. They brought him back to get the conviction that they got, but it will be thrown out. So it's a joke, but this is what he knows how this system works. But I would disagree. Because in his case, he was already pegged as somebody that the country didn't like if you were on the left, and certainly in these jurisdictions. It was not going to be hard to get a conviction on somebody like a Michael Cohen in these jurisdictions. We all witnessed how bad these jurisdictions ignore the law and abuse the law when we're talking about the cases like the case with Donald Trump. The case he testified in. Michael Cohen was caught lying on the stand, and yet his testimony was still central to securing that conviction. Why? Because, folks, people hear what they want to hear. They tell themselves stories. All right, in case people don't know this, I wasn't even going to go over this, but since we were I think I got a little extra time to do it. Most of the time when we look at, well, first of all, who are we talking about? What is a potential juror pool? Where do they get pools of jurors from when they are calling people for jury duty? Anybody? Anyone? Locals? YouTube? Anybody? Sorry, Rumble, I'm not looking at you at the second, but the voter file. If you are a registered voter, you are in their potential pool. So we're literally talking about the electorate here, or at least the VEP, the voting eligible population. All right, I am going to show you guys this. The crosstabs are coming. Just bear with me. I'm going to show you something first. Stop screen share. I'll have to go back to the crosstabs. I was going to bust the crosstabs out to make my point. But when lawyers, defense, prosecutions, right? In the beginning of a case, there's a process called voir dire, which is essentially jury selection. It's different depending on the judge. Some judges don't think that there's much value in the voir dire process, so they blow right through it. And you barely have any time to talk to jurors and decide to vet them and to find out whether or not they have views that could potentially exclude them from being on the jury and conducting their job as a juror in an impartial and fair way, right? If you're a member of the media, usually you're automatically thrown off the jury. There are other things that you could argue, Your Honor, strike juror number 16. This one is whatever. This one answered to my question because you literally asked them questions. This one answered this. Other judges understand the value of voir dire quite a bit, and they'll give you a lot of time to do it. And when that happens, especially, they bring in somebody like me. Often, they bring in me. And they say, you know what, why? And I'll tell you why. Because predicting how a juror is going to vote or how a juror is going to predict a certain case in the process, not just the case itself, but the argument, the story that the prosecutor is trying to tell versus the story that the defense attorney is trying to tell, that is predicting human behavior in much the same way that what we do for elections is predicting human behavior. Are they believing the story that candidate A is telling, or are they believing the story that candidate B is telling? And oh, by the way, what groups of people, what groups of people believe different stories more easily than others? And how do they come to those decisions? All right. How do they draw and reach those conclusions? It's much the same way. In a new era, in the bold new world, or whatever, brave new world. Thank you. In the brave new world is the era of information. Conducting voir dire can be significantly different than it has been in the past, right? In the bygone eras. And you can get kind of crazy when you're looking at databases like the ones we're looking at. No, by the way, I may actually change my databases really soon. I had a productive call with a company that has been poaching me for a while, and they have a lot of new shit, guys, and it's really cool. So I want to show it to you soon. Maybe I'll do that Wednesday. But they've upped their game, man. They've upped their game, because for years, literally years, I'm like, look, we do also this work, not just elections. We do this kind of work. That's what I do privately a lot. Right. That's how, in response to Friday's show, and if you watch, quite frankly, we had a great conversation last week. In the first segment, we talked about the Google's, censorship. Well, this is how I survived when other people couldn't, when they were taken off by Google. That's tragic, but we have other sides of a private business that really makes the money. I mean, this doesn't, it's nice, but it's not what I do. And so I told them this, and I need this, and I need that. And they have been doing it and chipping away at it for years. And then I finally met with them a couple of weeks ago, and it was, honestly, I'm very impressed. And I think it's going to go well with you guys, because it's the visuals, right? I think will be easier for you to understand. And I think you'll appreciate the value of the data more based on how they did it. Plus, it's quick. It's very quick. They might be a little bit more latency issues, but I'm willing to at least start to do both, not only for you guys, but for also in this work that we do. All right, so they call someone like me and they bring me in. Well, I didn't just know how to do this. Many, many years ago, we would go through what is essentially trial and error, no pun intended. And we would take how this is normally done and apply it to big data, where we knew so much more about you. And those attributes that are attached to you in our database, all right, tells us more and more and more about you, and helps us understand what you believe, why you believe it, how that will impact if we present you with a choice. And from there, we built out this process that is now, I think, generations beyond what a voir dire process used to be. And we can even, and over time, because of those judges that don't think there's much value to the process when there very much is, when we run into one of those, sometimes we have to be very quick on what we know about these people, get the information to the actual lead counsel themselves, and make sure that they disseminate that information to their team if they have one, and then decide what they want to do with each individual juror based on the answers, right? So, and then if sometimes we don't get that many answers, we have to pull what we know about these people and make the best guess we can. And what we found real quick is very simple. All right. Let me go up and find it. What is this? This is from August 4th, 2019. And it's a press release that I put up for some other lawyers at the behest of a client, at the request of a client who wanted me to take what they knew about voir dire and move it to another, and explain that this is now on another level and that you should absolutely adopt this. All right. So we go over the basics, which I will send to you guys on Locals. If you have never read this before, you would love this. All right. So the juror's belief system, and this is the ABCs of it all, right? And actually, let me read the whole thing. Let's go back. I can't show you the crosstab until you understand this. Research data to include past research that was done by other people and our own pioneer research shows that jurors don't simply deliberate based on facts and arguments. And you may be shocked to hear that, but they don't. Jurors deliberate based on their perception of the facts and the arguments. Very different. The juror's belief system dictates the various ways that particular jurors will perceive those facts and arguments. And understanding the ABCs is step one. The juror's belief system dictates the various ways that particular jurors perceive those facts. And A. Ellis, which was back in 1957, the ABCs of emotion, which stand for the activating event or any event that might happen in an environment. B refers to the individual's belief system itself, and all events are filtered through a set of beliefs, and based upon those beliefs, and the individual have a resulting consequent emotion. Using that, not even using it, but it happens. They don't know it. It just happens to us. When we're trying to make decisions, we are impacted by those belief systems because it leaves a consequent emotion, really. And we're making decisions with this on us like a wet blanket. Anyway, we can go to activating events. We can go through it. And honestly, like, it would be awesome if you guys did read this. But the bottom line, we take it to another level. We go through the research with David Ball, decide whether or not, various different past research makes sense, and then what you can do with it in the new era. Okay, and this is actually a great little graphic. Facts, arguments into the jurors' belief system. Out pops the story that they are telling themselves, listening and filtering the story from the prosecutor or the defendant. And then from there, they will reach that verdict. So they will process the story that makes more sense to them through their own process. All right. I mean, through their own belief system. Excuse me. Their own resulting belief system. All right. And that's all interesting. And we can go on to what we build. And some of this I'm going to stop. Sorry. Some of it I don't really want to show to the world, even though it is technically public. At least I'll make people go out and get it. But there's a part where we back up and say, okay, is there something we have observed that allows us to determine maybe what belief system a potential juror may have? Are there common belief systems, and are there common personalities and common experiences that make these jurors end up in that bucket of belief systems? And as it turns out, there freaking are. And it's incredible. And when you look at it and compare it with politics, we're looking at we talk about this stuff every day, folks. We talk about it every day. The difference between the professional class and the working class, and the difference between somebody who may be the difference between two people in the professional class based on their experiences, their background, their own backgrounds. As I have said to you before, in this statement really is a great example. Yes, Trump's base is a working class base, but you will not find a stronger supporter of Donald Trump than a rich Trumper with no college education, who makes a ton of money because they are self-made. It doesn't mean they're not in the higher social class. They're not up on the social class ladder. It means they just had a different way that they got there. Now, if there's somebody who has, I don't know, a postgraduate degree and works as a social worker and never uses it or something like that, they may have found themselves in a similar social status, but they did not have the same experiences getting there. And they will have very, very different views than the other person that we were talking about. All right, so I don't want to show too many of them, but I will say this. There are several that do matter. I'm just going to go over them a little bit because of what you will find in Northern Virginia, even Eastern, and in the District of Columbia. You will find a ton of these people, okay? Authoritarians, all right? And I'll leave it there. An authoritarian is basically somebody who defers to the prosecutor by nature. They're very hard to win over. They want to believe authority. And, okay, they'll express a desire for order, well-defined rules, rely on an authority when making their decisions, expect that authority correct the wrongs of society, and hold a strong belief in the legitimacy of conventional authority. Research shows authoritarians tend to convict and hand down harsher punishments. A time-tested study found authoritarians retain evidence from the prosecution more than defense evidence, and we know this to be true. The followings are examples of potential agree-disagree questions to reveal whether authoritarians believe, whether they have authoritarian beliefs when expressing agreements. And that I can give you later. That we can talk about later. I mean, honestly, very, very interesting. But what you have in an area like the District of Columbia and in Northern Virginia is a shit ton of authoritarians. Think about it. Why would you not? They owe their, listen, folks, I hate to be, especially Republicans out there, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but Virginia didn't turn blue because of immigrants. That's part of it, but it's not even the main part of it. Virginia turned blue because of the white people who live there and suck off the teat of the government. That's it. That is who they are. They defer to the government to make sure that they're tucked in nice and safe at night. You know, they defer to the government to make sure that their kids are safe while they're at school. They defer to the government to make sure that this and that and the other thing, and whether they have a paycheck. They like authority, as long as authority treats them well. And actually, in many cases, because there are different kinds of authoritarians, in many instances, you will find one breed where even when they are getting whipped by the man, they still don't care. It's safer to them to be abused by the authority than to venture out on their own. And that's what you find in the District of Columbia. Now, politically, they believe in government-centered solutions. They're Democrats. All right. In a nutshell. So, with that in mind, it's funny because when you add the politics, the ingredients of politics into the recipe here, you get some weird stuff that happens. And honestly, the belief systems are much stronger to predict a juror's verdict than their politics, except for in the cases of these certain jurisdictions where they do have a lot of predictive value. But that's ultimately one of the main problems that we have here. It's because it is about numbers. You know, you are much more likely to get these fanatic partisans. They're fanatical. That's it. They are fanatical. And then mixed with those belief systems, they're undentable. And I'll bring this case up. One of the jurors in the Kyle Rittenhouse case was an authoritarian. That was why they had an issue for a second there. Thank God for jury dynamics. Otherwise, Rittenhouse may have gotten a very different verdict. And by jury dynamics, I mean that after a while, jurors will start to bully. All right, they don't want to be there forever. Some of them may even have very strong views about the verdict and what it should be. Maybe they have very strong views about the case, even though they should be able to act impartial, theoretically. And they begin to bully. It's easier for that bullying to happen when the juror foreman is one of those people. But in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, that was not the case at all, in fact. Ultimately, he was acquitted, but there was a point where one of these jurors was looking at the FBI video, but had they had prejudged what they believed happened. And even with the dropping of the FBI video and being thrown in their face, and they're like watching it, folks. They're watching it, but they're just not processing how this changes everything. By the way, video that the great FBI had for months. Exculpatory evidence that they kept their hands on. To help what? To help the liberal prosecutor put a kid away for defending himself. By the way, that kid vomited for days in his cell after he was locked up. He was not the monster that everyone made him out to be. Media will do that to you. Right. So that was a close call in a district that is still largely believed, even though there was, of course, you know, if Democrats have a good year, they can perform in an area like that. You know, you have somebody somewhere like Racine and Kenosha, which is where that obviously was, where there are a lot of older silk stocking voters, professional class voters. Once upon a time, they were a bit more Republican, obviously, but they are not now in the era of Trump. Trump won this area all 3 times to a varying degree, with the largest margin being when he beat Kamala Harris. But it is holding on. Republicans are like holding on to a slight advantage in this jurisdiction over the years as the state gets a little bit tougher and tougher for them, even because of their own stupidity. But that's another show. That is an area that has a marginal advantage, right? And yet it was that difficult because, of course, it's very, very hard to make sure that you get every juror you want, and then, you know, that they're favorable to you. The District of Columbia, we're not talking about that. All right. And I know I don't want to blow through this. So while I bring up the other crosstab, because there are 2, and really I can only show you one at a time. While I bring up the other one, let's listen to the rest of them because we're going to get to this argument and about the unprecedented nature of what Donald Trump did. I don't disagree that seeing this and this kind of stuff I don't disagree that it's not dangerous. I just disagree that it's unprecedented. That's simply not true. It's untrue.
To pursue this prosecution, he did not. The U.S. prosecutors there said they did not see enough evidence. So he forces him out. He publicly declares to Pam Bondi, you need to target these political enemies, specifically labeling James Comey. And then, right after that, installs Lindsay Halligan, a former insurance lawyer with no prosecutorial experience, to go in there. And then within days, Comey's indicted, even after rank and file prosecutors, they gave her a declination memo that said, this is why we don't think there's enough evidence. So I don't think this is just the process playing out. I think this is Donald Trump explicitly abusing his power and directing a prosecution of a political enemy.
You said we have to be very clear about what happened, and then you left out the most critical part, where a prosecutor has to go into a grand jury, present the evidence, and make the case why charges are warranted. And the grand jury has to agree with that. In this case, they did. Now, I don't know if he'll be convicted or not, but you can't leave out and deny that there's a critical step where average, ordinary Americans get put in a room and they ultimately have to decide, does a case go or does it not go? And then they will decide whether you're guilty or whether you're not guilty. That is an important part of the process that he cannot really alter or change.
All right. So before we get into, you know, the first part of that, I just want to reiterate that it's much, 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 much easier to get a grand jury to issue an indictment than it is to get a jury of your peers, of the defendant's peers, to convict them. Very different. Much easier for the indictment, much harder for the conviction. The burden of proof, all of that is much, much lower. And the standards are lower, but it's also an easier process. All right. So, Jesus, people. So that's the end of that. So we can move on to that. All right. After Joe Biden was elected, and then we get January 6th occurs. Joe Biden is then sworn in on January 21st. By the spring of that year, we asked Americans whether or not they believed that what happened on January 6th was an insurrection or a protest gone wrong. And let me read exactly how. Let me read, because there were several questions that we asked. From what you have seen, read, or heard, which do you believe most of the protesters to be? The response choices were mostly peaceful protesters, and those arrested were charged with nonviolent offenses. Mostly violent protesters, and those arrested were charged with violent offenses. All right. The second one was, from what you have seen, read, or heard, which do you believe those accused of trespassing and obstruction to be? Probably guilty, probably innocent, unsure, no opinion. From what you have seen, read, or heard, do you believe those arrested for January 6th committed the crime of insurrection or sedition? Yes, no, unsure, no opinion. And that last one is remarkable. Okay. In the country at that time, for the first answer, 62% said, from what you have seen, read, or heard, which do you believe most protesters to be? 62% did say they believe them to be violent. About 30% said that they believe to be, nonviolent. Most of them charged were, they were mostly peaceful, and those who were charged with nonviolent offenses. That's the country. In the District of Columbia, 92% said that they were mostly violent protesters, and those arrested were charged with violent offenses. From what you have seen, read, or heard, which do you believe them? Those to be accused of obstruction, blah, 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 right? Probably guilty across the country was only 45%, which is crazy. I know it sounds weird, but it just goes to show you. Not that much of a drop. In the District of Columbia, 91%. From what you have seen, read, or heard, do you believe those arrested for January 6th committed the crime of insurrection or sedition? About 50%, I'm rounding, said that they did. About 47% said they did not, and the rest were unsure. In the District of Columbia, 96%. Unbelievable. So, that was in the spring after. Then you fast forward a little bit, and we get to, let me make sure I get January of 2024. Okay. This is by now. We have indictments, right? We have, we're going into that final year. No, I'm sorry, not January 6th of 2024. Let me get the date correct here, folks. Hold on. It's important. I want to make sure I get the exact date. August. Okay, because I'm saying this doesn't make sense. This is going into the election. All right. August of 2024. All right. We asked these questions again. And I'm going to show you for the District of Columbia how it went. This is after, before I show you this. This is after Donald Trump was indicted. The country revolted over it. He was indicted 91 times across all of the cases. This is after Tucker Carlson got all the footage from Kevin McCarthy, and the country began to realize that January 6th was not what they were told it was. This is after all of this information came out about the misbehaviors of the committee and everything. Videos all over social media showing people letting these protesters in. Showing evidence of agitators from the federal government in the crowd. We just learned what we knew back then and what we know now, and not just us. I think, honestly, most people watching the show knew how this was going to turn out once more information was able to be released. I'm talking about the country as a whole. By this time now, going into the election, only 42% believed that only 42% of the country believed that these were mostly violent protests. Probably guilty is only 38%. This is nothing at this point. This is the District of Columbia, even after all of those years and all of that time. Okay, here it is. From what you have seen, heard, this is 2 months before the election, folks. And Donald Trump will go on to win people who said that threats to democracy was their most important issue. All right, let me pop this down, this up. From what you have seen, read, or heard, which do you believe most of the protesters to be? Mostly peaceful, 27%. Mostly violent, 60%. Now 13% were roughly were unsure or had no opinion. From what you have seen, read, or heard, which do you believe those accused of trespassing and obstruction to be? Probably guilty, still 71%. Probably innocent, 16%. From what you have seen, read, or heard, do you believe those arrested on January 6th committed the crime of insurrection? 66%. All of those years later. And again, It's an improvement from the 90s, but this is what you're dealing with in the District of Columbia. Honestly, the adjacent jurisdictions aren't going to be much more favorable to the Trump administration. That's just true. It will be extremely difficult for these people to get a conviction even when somebody is guilty. And we saw this with John Durham in the Northern District of Virginia. We saw how Manafort was handled. We have seen this over and over again. Bob McDonald. Complete railroad job. I'm not saying what I like what Bob McDonald did, but the Supreme Court unanimously overturned Bob McDonald's conviction of bribery. Well, the people of Virginia were willing to fry him. Okay. All right. It's 3:00, so we do have to get on to this. And let me play a clip that illustrates the mindset of these people. Okay. Because this is a good one. Think about Michael Flynn. Think about, I'm trying to be careful here because honestly, some people I thought were incredibly stupid. When it comes to the indictments that happened in Georgia, I mean, Barnes and I knew these people were cracked, and like, I wouldn't help them. Barnes tried to help in the beginning, but then it was just taken over by quacks who didn't know what they were doing. The effort was completely destroyed. So Robert and I had a powwow and said, we're out. I was willing to help, but they were just saying things that were patently false. And I was trying to tell them that some things are credible and some things are not. This is all about the absentee ballots, the unsoliciteds, particularly, but the absentee ballots returned by mail. And this is all about signature verification. And if you go down that route, I'm happy to help you with historic rejection rates, with whether or not, something qualifies by that state law as matching, signature matching, whether or not the ballot was the chain of custody was followed, and they just went off the rails. So like, I'm trying to be careful. Some of these people asked for it, they just did. And some of these people like Jeba Ellis, she was just in over her head. She's an idiot attorney. Like that's not a smart person. All right. And she just got in over her head and didn't realize, the danger of doing that, especially in that political environment. So I'm not here to defend. I'm not here to defend her. By the way, she cut a deal. She cut a deal and finked on Trump, immediately. Even though these cases now, she wouldn't even have this conviction on her record if she was just strong enough and morally courageous enough to hold on. I mean, put up a GoFundMe, because I sympathize with how much these prosecutions cost. It's horrible when you are targeted by the government like this, any government, state, whatever, federal. It's horrible what this does to your life. That's the entire point of why I'm going to play this clip. It's hilarious this piece of shit would even say this, but he does. But so I sympathize with her and others who did what they did, except don't put up a GoFundMe claiming that you're going to fight you're going to fight lawfare tooth and nail and then take the $250,000 and cut a deal. You didn't raise enough to fight a trial? Raise more. Fighting lawfare tooth and nail is not cutting a deal to be a skunk rat to save your own ass. And as it looks out, you're going to lose your license to practice law anyway. It's what Sidney Powell did. At least I have some respect for. But I'm going down the line here. Some of these poor people, George Papadopoulos, Carter Page, made out to be traitors. Michael Flynn, 4 decades of service to the country, in and out of uniform, most of that in uniform, all for nothing. To lose the family home that they saved for so they could have a lawyer to defend him, and to make sure that his son, Michael Flynn Jr., didn't get thrown in jail, because that's what they did, by the way. They threatened Flynn that if he kept fighting, they were going to throw his son in jail. Is that a fair process? Did he be called a traitor by traitors? Michael Flynn's real sin was not only disagreeing with Barack Obama, but making it known publicly that he did disagree. And actually, it wasn't even his fault, by the way. How that all got out, that wasn't even his fault. But him not going along with fake intelligence assessments about what would happen in Iraq if Obama did what he did, which led to the rise of ISIS, an Islamic caliphate, which Trump had to come in and crush. And his second sin was believing when the FBI came to talk to him that they were actually good guys. Because he had worked for so long in that area that he thought they would defer, like have respect and be honest. No, folks, never talk to the feds without a lawyer. By the way, never talk to the cops without a lawyer. I'm back to blue, but I also back not being stupid. State authorities can be just as corrupt when they want to be. Never speak to the feds or the police without a lawyer. I don't care how honest or simple or little it is. The answer is, I want a lawyer. That's it. And how you want to play it? It'll be easier now. I want a lawyer. That's it. Never talk to them. That mistake Michael Flynn made, and look where he ended up. Life ruined. Caputo. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal bills for Mark Caputo. And a lifetime of being seen as something you're not. Now these little pieces of trash have the nerve to whine and complain about how hard Jim Comey's life is going to be.
Comey will end up walking away from this, but this will still be expensive. It will be stressful. It could ruin Comey's life for a time, and it seems to be foreshadowing.
Stressful? It'd be stressful. It's expensive. And ruin his life for a time. You ruin these people's lives forever. The View crashed the Dow, falsely claiming that Michael Flynn flipped on Trump because that's what it was all about. By the way, it was Joe Biden's idea. We have it in his own handwriting, which I'll get to more in a second about whether or not this is unprecedented. It was Joe Biden's idea to use the Logan Act to go after Michael Flynn. The Logan Act was for colonial times, when we didn't have the ability to verify whether or not somebody was actually who they said they were. And the old schmuck could get on a boat, sail their ass to France, and pretend they're a diplomat. Unbelievable. It is not for everyone knows is an incoming national security advisor to talk to his counterpart in the Russian government or the Chinese government or any government. That's how this works. Joe Biden came up with the idea to use the Logan Act during a meeting with his old boss, the president, Barack Obama, when they were coming up with this scam. Thank you, Obama, for writing it down in your own handwriting to verify this. This idea, this is unprecedented, is ludicrous, man. It's crazy.
If Comey's now, who could be next?
Right. I think that's the punishment. It's the punishment. James Comey has to have expensive lawyers now, and it'll take a lot of his time and
the book deal money, Laura.
Investment.
Emotional investment.
His liberty will be at stake in this case, and that's what. Look, the Justice Department. A federal indictment is nothing to sneeze at. It is a life-changing event, and this is clearly punishment directed at James Comey. I mean, it couldn't be more explicit because that's what Donald Trump demanded. in so many words in that message to Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. It's basically saying, go indict this guy. Find something to indict this guy on.
Bullshit, folks. That is the biggest load of crap ever. Joe Biden. Oh, what did we do? We deleted this? Oh, come on. I needed that. Anyway, Joe Biden, most recently, or at least the people in the White House, if Joe is shitting himself and drooling on himself and too busy doing that to actually give the order himself. But the order to go after Trump absolutely came from the White House. We know the visitors logs. We know that's, you don't just step down from the number 3 position at the Department of Justice to go work at the Southern District of New York. That's not even a lateral professional move, folks. That's not even a lateral career move. That is deciding that you want to work at a fast food restaurant after you've been working at managing the Four Seasons. Okay? Like, that is ridiculous. But we can go back even further. JFK targeted his political opponents. Lyndon Johnson targeted his political opponents. Franklin Delano Roosevelt targeted his political opponents. And yes, Nixon did as well. Barack Obama maybe he didn't give the direct order like go find something. He did worse. He said go find a bunch of crimes that you could peg to this guy to hinder his presidency. Also, we had the IRS going after conservative groups all through his administration. In order, what? For what? Why would you sick the IRS after 501c3s? Many of which are obviously classified as charities or educational groups because they were educating the public on things you don't want them to know so you can win elections. That's why. It's the idea that this is nuts. This is crazy. Look at how many people they went after. Hat tip Alex Brusiewicz on Twitter. Look at this. The former mayor of New York City. America's mayor. And this is just in that case alone. Give me a break. I mean, this is right. He said we will do everything in our power to make sure Donald Trump could not return to the White House. Months later, we get the indictments. Get out of here. Come on. It's totally ridiculous. And boo-hoo. Poor Jim Comey, a crooked piece of shit who made millions of dollars off of being able to sell books about his corrupt practices as the top cop in the United States of America. I'm going to write a book and profit off my failed coup attempt. And honestly, it barely failed. Did it fail? Did it? I mean, ultimately, it took their friends in China to accidentally unleash a virus on the entire world that just appears engineered to kill Trump supporters, by the way. So they could reform the entire electoral process and put a moratorium on verification procedures all across the country. Give me a break, man. Which brings, honestly, to the last clip that I want to play before we boogie, and that is Sean Spicer, who brought up how Trump world feels and whether or not they discuss whether or not this is unprecedented a little bit, and then get into some of the other stuff that I want to just react to, and then we'll call it a day.
I'll read you verbatim a text I got this morning from one of my former White House colleagues. Tell your two-way friends that this one feels good because we know what he was doing was illegal to us. We watched it. We lived it. Now we just have to watch him weather the media declaring him as being persecuted. Worth it. Enjoy your legal bills, Lion Comey. That's how a lot of us feel right now. And I'm just going to tell you.
Put that in a time capsule. That is perfectly stated. That's the way the Trump world views this. It's perfectly stated. And,
I would argue that's the way that even most of the country views it. That's the way that all of those independents who said, no, we trust Donald Trump to protect us from threats to democracy. They obviously view it that way too.
And that, I don't want anyone selectively prosecuted. I don't want anyone on ticky-tack charges. But But if you're talking about the politics of this and why the president did what he did and why he ordered the Justice Department to do it, it's all embodied right in what Sean read.
Yeah, but hold on a second. You gotta, okay, let's unpack your statement. Start with the fact that he ordered it. Okay, unprecedented.
Outrageous. Not unprecedented. Not unprecedented.
Okay, Richard Nixon. Who else?
I think Kennedy probably did.
Oh.
They're all smear the Kennedys.
Okay. All right. So unprecedented. Biden did not order stuff. Mark, that's not.
What he said about Garland, absolutely.
Biden seemed to encourage it.
So okay, did Joe Biden go on X?
No, but Dan, it's not going to be apples to oranges.
Could
Dan,
Joe Biden go on X?
Dan,
I mean, could he?
Dan, I don't want to go down this road because you're right. What the president did, in many ways, unprecedented and
firing U.S. attorneys.
No, people fire them all the time. Thoroughly outrageous.
Not for that reason.
Thoroughly
Mark.
outrageous.
Not for that reason.
Comey's son worked for the Eastern District.
Give me a break, right?
Any American who cares, and I joked about norms at the top.
Give me a break. Comey's son worked for the Eastern District. Are you giving the judge in the case against Donald Trump in New York? His daughter worked for Joe Biden. Give me a break, man. Honestly, with this shit.
Any American cares about the abuse of power by the president regarding the Justice Department should be outraged. And it's an outrage that Republicans are not speaking up. 100% agree with you, Dan.
But you can't yada yada over this.
I'm not. I didn't yada yada over
it. I'm going to take 30 seconds to just say this. It is unprecedented for the president to order it. It is unprecedented to then blow out any U.S. attorneys that said, his own team said, no, there isn't anything there.
You don't know. You don't know that.
No.
All right, guys. Well, we don't know
it.
Hold on a sec. All we're going on is by the reports that, by the way, Pam Bondi hasn't come out and refuted it.
You're asserting that. You don't need.
All right, listen, let me just stop right there because we got to go here and I don't want to hold you guys up any further than this. And let me just leave you with this. Nobody gives a shit. They ruined everybody's lives. They did this first. Like it's a tit for tat situation now. Honestly, it's not abuse of power when it's called accountability. They come up with these bullshit excuses just to avoid being held accountable for their actions. He broke the law. And obstruction, and which is hilarious. He got charged with obstruction and making false statements. That's hilarious. By the way, he lied to Congress under oath multiple times. We know this. It's an open and shut case. Everyone's like, "Oh, I can't. We don't know what they have against him." All they charged him with was obstruction and making false statements. The Martha Stewart crime, which he got coined the Martha Stewart crime, by the way, because she accidentally gave an email with the wrong date. I'm pro Martha Stewart. It's because she's a white Republican woman. That's why she got charged. Or a Republican profile kind of a woman. Like that old school Republican woman who's like, make your home awesome. Make your family nice meals. Come up with great things for your house. Even though in her own life, she was known to be quite a bitch, actually. Difficult to work with. But that's not what she portrayed. She had to go down. Can't have that. And that's why they call it the Martha Stewart crime. Because of Comey using this BS to go after Martha Stewart because he had nothing else on her. This is hilarious. You don't see the irony in this? He should be charged with sedition and thrown in a hole, tarred and feathered, and made to parade up Pennsylvania Avenue. Because that's what our founding fathers would have done with this piece of shit. Cluck, cluck. Walk, chicken. Walk. Can't even call him a turkey. Can't have that. That's my nickname for my son. Not tainting that. All right. Anywho, we'll obviously be talking a lot more about this, but this is what I want you to remember leaving this episode, which is that without judicial reform, even with all of what I just said, open and shut, I'm telling you right now, if we ran a poll in the Eastern District, if we ran a poll in Nova, if we ran a poll in the District of Columbia, that entire area, it doesn't matter. They act like it's better. It's not better. Politically charged cases are, how could I put this? These jurisdictions have been broken by fanaticism. They no longer work. We need an independent jurisdiction. We need a different way of doing it. Guys, it's the year 2025. We can get much more creative and much more, we can use the tools, the modern tools that we have at our disposal to reinstill faith and confidence and integrity in this entire process. His peers are the same corrupt people that he's been working with and for under their protection for years. This is a man who idolized a person who let two innocent people rot in a jail for a murder, rot in a prison for a murder they did not commit, so he could protect that a gangster named Whitey Bulger, because Whitey Bulger was playing them and feeding them fake information hilariously. That's who these people are. What do you expect their neighbors to be like? Republicans are like going down a road here that I'm a little bit worried. You're promising all this accountability, and I'm telling you, if you don't get it, we're going to end up worse than we were before. You take a swing and you miss, the ball game is over. Don't forget, if you like the videos, to like them and share them far and wide. The links to the public polling project and everything is down below. All right, there is a new project up. We can take our time with it, honestly. I was going to do a fall one, and then we'll do the Christmas poll at the end of the year. We are also going to do an event. I'm just saying it. We're going to do an event. I'll let you, locals, I'll let you in on it a lot more. Probably in the car, actually, because I'm going to go do a car play video after this, I think. Yeah, probably will. And we'll get into it a lot more. Let me take my buddies off the screen here. Good guys, a lot of them. They're good guys. Even though I disagree with them vehemently on many, many things, because I think they missed the mark. Pun intended. Actually, pun not intended. But I'm going to say that I intended it because his name is Mark. Get it? All right. What else? What am I missing here? I'll let you know more if I feel like I'm missing something. I don't know. Maybe I just buried the lead. But in any event, the best place to follow us, as always, is on Locals, right there below. peoplespundit.locals.com, peoplespundit.locals.com. I'm going to kick rocks. Have a great rest of the day. If you're in the path of the storm or storms, make sure that you are prepared for them. Hunker down and be safe. All right. I will see you guys in a little bit on Locals, especially. All the best, folks.